All right, so today's topic is Veshameru. And as I have been attempting to do with each of these classes, or I'm not even sure I should call them a class. We'll call them presentations. Is to give you a little liturgy, traditional liturgy, chanting, nusach of the Spanish-Portuguese tradition, as well as some of the art music, choir pieces, things that are not meant for the kahal to really be able to sing, other than to appreciate, and maybe those who have some talent can sing with them or hum along, but it's not meant for, let's say, it's not meant for doing it at home. So we're going to do both of those tonight. Our topic is Veshameru, and actually I have a PowerPoint just to keep us going along. Let's see here. Okay, can you see my screen? It says random walk down Mill Street. Today's topic is Veshameru. Now, we say Veshameru in our liturgy 3 times, regularly anyway. The first is on Friday evening during the Shabbat, the evening service of Shabbat, the Arbit of Friday night, before the Amidah, which is a little interesting. We're going to talk about that briefly a little later. Then we say it again embedded in the text of the Amidah of Shachrit, shortly after the Kiddusha. And then we say it again during Kiddush, after Tefillah is over, and we go to have our cholent, Sephardic chamin, or adafina, as Aunt Henny used to make. Then we say Veshameru there as well. And we're going to talk about each of these things. We're going to do it in the opposite order. We're going to start with the Kiddush. Then I'm going to just sing for you how it sounds in the Shachrit. So it's different than the melody that we do for the Kiddush. And then we'll get to the art music from the Friday evening service in the Arbit. So here we go. First things first. So when we have Kiddush on Shabbat morning, you may not realize that this is not really the main thing that's called Kiddush. Kiddush is really Friday night. Friday night we have Kiddush. There's a special formula, a special blessing that is said. It's a relatively long blessing. But then on Shabbat morning we also make Kiddush, because we're supposed to have Kiddush wherever we have our Shabbat meal, both in the evening and the day. And they say, wherever we have Kiddush, wherever we have our meal, we have Kiddush. Wherever we have Kiddush, we have our meal. Kind of learns that both ways. And then and there's a famous Gemara where they asked a visiting rabbi, here we have Shabbat morning, we have our luncheon. Please, Rabbi, say the Kiddush. And he didn't know what they were talking about. So they said, Kiddush Rabbah, say the great Kiddush. So he picked up a cup of wine and he said, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, borei pri hagefen. They all said amen, and they started eating. So he knew he did the right thing. So the Kiddush on Shabbat morning is just the blessing of wine, that you have it over wine. So we have expanded that we don't just say the blessing on wine. And there are different customs, but almost everybody says Veshameru. Some people have different verses as well, and we're going to do some of those here. Now, if you have been to Sheretz Israel for Kiddush, pre-pandemic, during the pandemic now, there is a certain formula that is followed, and that is the initial verses which we recite, which come from Isaiah. We recite them in English. I don't know when this was started. I don't know if this was started in the days of Henry Paramendes. I don't know if it was started during the days of Poole. I suggest, without much evidence, that it started in the days of Henry Paramendes, but I don't really know. But I have fond memories of my childhood. Some of your memories go longer than mine, but I remember Dr. Gerstein, if because of the Sabbath thou turnest away thy foot from pursuing thy business on my holy day, and thou callest the Sabbath a delight. And he reads through these 2 verses here in the translation that's in Dr. Poole's book. And when I was a little kid, I used to stand there during the Kiddush, and when he said, thou turnest away thy foot, I would turn my foot, because that's what he said. So I would turn my foot from pursuing my work. Anyway, those are verses that come from Isaiah, which I'm going to sing for you in a little bit. But first, I'm going to tell you how we chant the Veshameru, which most of you, or many of you, know already, because you've been to Kiddush and you've heard it. And it goes like this. Veshameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asod et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit molam, beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim nasa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz, u'bayom ha-shevini Shabbat vayinafak. Nalken berach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat. Vaykadesh Havrei Maranan. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei peri hagefet. Or something like that. Now, there's a few interesting things. When I was a child, the Chazan, usually Dr. Gerstein or Rabbi Angel, would say this. And everyone would stand there with their little cup of wine and be quiet until they got to the last words of the verses, which were Shabbat vayinafak. But somehow, over the last 30 years or so, people like the melody and they sing along. So that nowadays, as soon as the rabbi starts singing Veshameru, people join along Veshameru, and there's a soft hum of everybody singing along with the Chazan. And then they get quiet when it says Alkein Beirach, so that they hear the bracha and they say Amen. That is what we do today in our synagogue, and that is the traditional melody. We're going to hear it again a little later. Now, some people have the custom of reciting these verses from Isaiah. My own grandfather, Judah Gedalia, did not. He just said Veshameru when we came home. But Bram Cardozo, who came from Amsterdam, and many other people recite these verses from Isaiah, and they recite them in Hebrew. And they use, because they're from the prophets, they use the Haftarah melody according to the trope, which I have given you at the bottom of the page. And so it sounds like this. I think this is a really nice custom, and I, from time to time, have adopted it myself. I don't always do it consistently, but I like it, and so I urge you to do it as well. You get a little bit of the Haftarah Nusach in it, the verses are nice, and it goes into the traditional Veshameru. And it sounds like this. And by the way, I want to see in the chat, I don't know if I'll see it while I'm doing the presentation, but let me know what your custom is in your home. Im tashiv mishabat raglecha nasot chafatecha biyom kodshi vekarata lashabat moneg liktosh Adonai michubad vechibato mengasot derachecha mimetzoch heftecha v'daber dabar as hitnanag nal Adonai v'hirkaticha Al bamote aret ve'ha'achalticha nachalat yanakro babicha pi Adonai diber Veshameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat, and so on. So that's the way many people make Kiddush. I don't have a lot to say other than just to tell you where this comes from. Veshameru comes from Exodus. Comes from Parshat Ki Tisa, and it's two verses. There's a longer section, pericope, about the Shabbat there. The part we say is talking about Bnei Yisrael observing the Sabbath forever, the Dorotam Berit Olam. But right before this, the part that we don't say is the part about the people who don't observe Shabbat, Moti Mas. That we skip over that part. We start here at the nice part, I think, or the nicer part. It's all nice, but that's Kiddush on Shabbat morning. Okay. Now, when you come to synagogue on Shabbat morning, and the other place where Veshameru appears in the liturgy is embedded inside the Amidah of Shachrit, and here it does not take on that special melody that I sang for you before. We don't say Veshameru b'nei Yisrael Shabbat. We read it in the melody of the rest of the Amidah. Shachrit Amidah has its own mode, and the Veshameru there follows that mode. So it comes right after the Kiddusha. Let's see if my brain will able to transition melodies quickly. Let's see. This is why I get paid the big bucks. Let's see if I can pull it off. Okay. So this is within the Amidah. So the Chazan is reciting the Amidah. It's the Shachrit. We have a silent Amidah, and the Chazan repeats it, and he says this in this paragraph. Yismach Moshe u'matanachako kigne b'ne'eman karatalo. No, I can't do it. Let's see. I got to get back into it. I have a feeling this recording might not make it. We'll see. Okay. Yismach Moshe b'matanachako kigne b'ne'eman karatalo kilil tiferet v'rosho natata bingom do lefanecha al har Sinai u'shnei luchot avanim horid biyado v'chatu bahem shemirat Shabbat v'chen katu b'toratecha v'shameru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat v'nasor haShabbat ledorotam v'ritnu lam beni u'ben b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam Yishesh et yamim nasa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz ubayom hashevini Shabbat vayinafas v'lo neseto Adonai Elohei legoyei ha'aratzot lo hinchalto malkein le'obedei p'tilim gam b'menuchato lo yishkenu ngaredim ki le'amecha Yisrael nitzato bi'ahava v'zerangako b'asher b'macharta. So I gave you a little snippet before and after, just to show you that the Veshameru, when we say it in the Shachrit, it just is part of the Shachrit. It doesn't have a special melody. It follows the Shachrit mode, chants, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And now we get to Friday night. Friday night's a little bit interesting. Most synagogues, but not all, recite Veshameru after Hashkivenu, before the Kaddish, before the Amidah, in the Arvit service of Friday evening. Some communities, like Chabad, have excised it from the liturgy. Thank you, John. Some communities have excised it, and the reason for doing so is because it's a little bit strange that it's there in the first place. There is in the Talmud a principle that we connect, and this means literally like in time and space or whatever, the blessing of Ga'al Yisrael, that God has redeemed Israel, or God is the Redeemer of Israel, God has redeemed Israel, to the tefillah, to the amidah, the prayer, to the main prayer. That is supposed to be connected from Shema, the blessings of the Kriyat Shema, to the blessing of Ga'al Yisrael, is connected to the tefillah. But then when you get to Arbit, and when you pray in the morning, that is exactly what happens. And you go directly from Ga'al Yisrael into the Amidah. And some people are so strict about it that they will have the Chazan repeat the blessing, and the Chazan will trail off till he gets to quiet, never finishing the word Yisrael, so that no one says Amen. So they go directly from the words Ga'al Yisrael into the Amidah. That's probably, and who am I to say, that is a custom that some people have, not here, not ours, but there is such a custom. It's probably not halachically meaningful. You can say Amen, and probably should say Amen to some of these blessings, including Ga'al Yisrael. And certainly if you did say Amen, it is not considered a hefsek. But there is a custom not to say Amen and go right from Ga'al Yisrael to the Amidah. And all of that is because you're supposed to connect that blessing to the Amidah itself. Then you get to Friday night, then you get to Arbit on a weekday, and you have something called Hashkivein. I'm not going to talk about that here, but The rabbis go to great lengths to explain why Hashkivenu is just an extension of the blessing of Gal Yisrael, and really it's not an interruption. But then you get to Friday night, and then you have Veshameru. And that's not part of Hashkivenu. So what's going on here? So the short and simple answer, and probably the right answer, is that in the Talmud there is a debate about whether arbit is a mandatory prayer or not. And the majority opinion is that arbit is reshut. It is a voluntary prayer. And so if it's a voluntary prayer, if you connect it or you don't connect it or you have extra things in there, not such a big deal. You don't even have to say it at all, according to the letter of the law, in one opinion in the Talmud. There is another opinion in the Talmud that the evening service is a chiyuv, and you must say the Amidah. And so for them, they go to lengths to explain why Veshameru is also part of Hashkivenu and part of this whole theme of God, of redemption and God's protection. But I need not get into it any more than we have here so far. Suffice it to say that it is a little bit awkward, according to some, to have this prayer here in the first place. Nevertheless, from the days of the Middle Ages and earlier till now, we say Veshameru on Friday evening. So, if the choir is not here, such as all summer long, we use the same melody that we do for Kiddush. So we'll finish the Hashkivenu, finish the blessing, Haporei Sukat Shalom Aleinu V'al Amo Yisrael V'al Yerushalayim, Amen. And then the Chazan will say, Veshameru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat anasod et HaShabbat adorotam berit olam b'ni u'ben b'nei Yisrael hotzi den olam ki sheishet yamim nasa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz u'bayom ha'shebini Shabbat vayinafash. Those last two words are said by the Kahal. Chazan repeats them. Shabbat vayinafash. And say Kaddish and Amidah. If the choir is here, we get some very, very nice choral pieces. The one that is most usually done is by Samuel Naumburg, who is here on the right. Samuel Naumburg was originally a Chazan from Germany, and then he moved to Paris and became the music director of the main. He moved up and up and up in his career, but he became the music director of the main Ashkenazic synagogue in Paris. I think it's called the Victoire Synagogue, and he was, in France during his era there was a consistory system where he was like the chief cantor for the Paris district, and as such he became the musical director, and he was an important person in the synagogue music of the time. Not only that, he was a genius, and he was an amazing composer, and as well as a bit of a musicologist. So we owe a lot of things to him. He found and published and popularized the music of Salomone Rossi. It had been published in the 16th or 17th century in Mantua before him. It was not well known, but Naumburg published it or parts of it he published in his works, and then he published a separate work just dedicated to Rossi. And so not only did he have his own compositions, he had others. He published some pieces of his colleagues, such as Halevi, in his publications. But he is very, very prolific. And in the German Ashkenazic tradition, the Western Ashkenazic tradition, he's very well known for many, many pieces that are still sung today in the Western Ashkenazic choral tradition. We sing some of them here, in particular, Uvnucho Yomar on occasion, which is also Eitz Chaim Hi. Some people who are more familiar with the Ashkenazic version of this melody. Da 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 bum 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 da 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 bum bum. That's Naumburg. We sing it pretty regularly or semi-regularly, but we sing every Friday night, just about a Naumburg Veshameru, which I'm going to play for you now. let's see if I can figure out how to do this. I'm actually going to stop this share. Pretty awesome. And we get that every Friday night. If that is not a selling point for the synagogue, I don't know what is. Where else can you go and hear? I mean, it's magic. It's magical. It's not the only magical piece on Friday night, but it's one of them. Now, we sing that melody, and by we, I mean our choir led by Leon Hyman, or Adam Hyman, and the members of the Sheretz Israel choir, pretty much every single Friday night. But it is not the only one in the book. In fact, when the Sheretz Israel published its music, the choir music, it had two Veshamerus. This was around 1940, 1941. They had a book was published called Kol She'erit Yisrael. It was volume 1. It was meant to be volume 1 of 2. And it was prepared by Leon Kramer. Leon Kramer was the choir master of Sheretz Israel for like 60 years or 55 years. In the first half of the from the late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century. And so the first Veshameru number 1 was the one we just heard, but Veshameru number 2 was by Leon Kramer, and we're going to actually hear that in a minute. Now, let me go back to my PowerPoint. So Veshameru number 2 is by Leon Kramer. Oh, actually, let me go back a little bit even more. So when you're in synagogue, uh, the choir sings this beautiful piece. It's, as you saw, it's not short. It's 2.5, 3 minutes long, and they don't press play and go back and see if people are hearing it in synagogue. It lasts a little shorter than we did it tonight. But they do something very unusual, which is after the choir sings Veshameru, then the Chazan says the whole thing over again using the traditional mode. Veshameru. There is no reason to do that. And the only reason that is done, I think, is because the traditional melody was the one they had always been using for generations. And if you listen to the customs of Amsterdam and London, they're almost identical. They're not perfectly identical, but they're very, very similar. And so that's the traditional mode. And the powers that be, perhaps the board, perhaps there was a choir committee, perhaps there was a ritual committee back then, when they introduced the Naumburg piece, they said, no, we can't take away the traditional melody. So they just added it. So they have a choir piece, and then the Chazan says the whole thing over again. So if we were worried about interrupting Geula, the Ga'al Yisrael, to the Amidah, I don't think we would have said it at all. We certainly wouldn't say it twice. So I'm pretty sure that our congregation is coming out on the side that there's no reason to worry about whether there is a hafsaka between the blessing and the Amidah. Little tidbit. There you go. Now, Kramer's version, by the way, this is Leon Kramer at the piano. I got this picture from his grandson who sent it to me a few months ago. And then I found this other picture by a little bit of deep searching the internet. On the left here, you see here, Leon Kramer's a short man. I don't know how many of you are into Chazanut, but if you recognize the person to the right of Leon Kramer, he is very, very famous. He was also spectacularly short and famous for being short, but a big stature. That is Yossele Rosenblatt. That's the cantor Yossele Rosenblatt here. And the one with the arrow is even shorter, Leon Kramer, our choir master. Kramer was a very, very famous music director back in the day. Nowadays we think about things like Zamir Chorale and things like that. The singing societies of the time were founded basically by Kramer. He's founded something called the Halevi Singing Society. He founded music education at the Y. He's basically the person who developed these volunteer choruses, lay choruses throughout New York City back in the early 20th century. And so he was pretty famous in his time, and is now no one knows him. And the only people who still sing his works are us here at Sheretz Israel. Now I have to preface, I'm going to play for you Veshameru. It is not Kramer's best piece. In fact, when I spoke to Leon Hyman about it, I asked him why he doesn't do it. He said, it's nothing special. That was Leon Hyman's opinion. And you'll probably hear it when I play it for you right now. The recording is not a professional recording. It was done at a rehearsal. So it has some quality issues to it. And you can actually, if you really are good with it, and if I deign to share the recording with you, if you listen to it carefully, you'll hear some hesitation on the part of the choir. But this is Leon Kramer's Veshameru. By the way, I say this with love. There are some amazing pieces by Leon Kramer, and at another future date, I'll devote one of these entire presentations to Kramer. But let's listen to Leon Kramer. Okay, that was Leon Kramer. How many of you have heard it before? Probably not many. I think it starts off strong, kind of gets weak at the end, but we'll see. We'll see if this one survives in the repertoire. We pretty much never do it. Now, there are a few others that we have. Let's see. There were some chats here. What did I miss? Okay, here we are. Interesting. I like your quote. I think your idea is right, David. I'm not sure. It's in the place of the congregation, but that would mean that on the weeks when we don't have the choir, like in the summer, that the congregation should say Veshameru, and then the Chazan says Veshameru, which is not what we do. Just the Chazan says it. So I'm not sure. Not sure your theory holds water. We'll have to debate it Talmudically one of these days. Okay. Going back to my PowerPoint here. So we have two more pieces to listen to if you have the patience to stick around. One is by Leon Hyman, our choir master, our current choir master. I'll let you in on a secret. He is retiring this year after 66 years of dedicated service. I dare you to find someone who's given more of their life to any institution. 66 years. There are not enough words I could possibly say about Leon Hyman. But a few years ago, probably about 10 already by now, Leon started composing music for our synagogue. And one of the pieces that he composed was a Veshameru. Now, I got to tell you some of the insider politics, and this is why I don't always like recording these things, is that Leon presented a whole bunch of pieces that he composed, 5, 6, 7 pieces, to the choir committee. And yes, there is a choir committee. The choir committee only liked some of them, not all of them. And they took a long time answering him about what would be allowed in the repertoire, what wouldn't be allowed in the repertoire, when they could sing it, how frequently they could sing it, because our synagogue really doesn't like change and doesn't like new things very much. Leon got a little annoyed at the pace of which the committee was taking to approve his pieces. By the way, there are members of that choir committee here on this call right now. I will not call on them. And so he started pulling things out of his of what he used to do. One of which was the Leon Kramer one, which was listened to, which is why they had a choir rehearsal, which is why I have a recording of it, because Leon said, "You don't want to approve my pieces? Well, here's one that we used to sing all the time. How do you like that one?" And then he pulled out another Veshameru by Naumburg, which he told me that he hadn't performed in about 40 years. And it's amazing. And I'm going to play that one for you next. I'm going to recalling that Naumburg's Veshameru number 2. That just means that it's our number 2. Has nothing to do with reality of how it's notated in Naumburg's books. But that one, it's available online if you want to listen to it. Maybe some of you have heard it before. It's on our web. It's on my Spanish Portuguese, my own personal Sheretz Israel YouTube page. So let's see if I can find that. And hopefully the music will work. Let's see. Okay. Can someone in the chat tell me if they can see this YouTube page? Just a yes or a no. And also, I'm going to play it. You'll tell me if you can hear it. So it's gorgeous. There's no doubt about it. So I don't think I explained it well when I told you that Leon got annoyed that the committee hadn't been approving his pieces, and in particular he had a Veshameru that was not approved. He wanted to show to everyone that the Veshameru didn't always have to be the same one every week, that there were others in our repertoire. He just hadn't been doing them for 40 plus years. And he demonstrated that very well in 2019. The committee did not approve his Veshameru, but I'm going to play it for you anyway. At least I'm going to play for you a rehearsal recording. So it is done on my phone from the ladies gallery. The audio is not that great. It's a little shaky. I had a better video because we actually, the choir performed it at a dinner a few years back, but I am unable to show that to you today. But if you write to me, maybe I can find that. If you like what you hear tonight, you can write to me and I'll get you recordings that may be even better than what I presented. And we're going to close with that. I mean, I'll do a little bit of follow-up afterwards, but the last thing we're going to hear is Leon Hyman's. Maybe I should have closed with this one. It's so good. I can tell you that we did it for Shabbat Shirah in 2019. It was a special presentation. We advertised it ahead of time. People came to hear it. We did it in memory of David Busso. So I'd like to recognize him, his memory for this as well. And it was the first time that I think anyone in the synagogue had heard that Veshameru before, except for Leon and maybe a few other people. And one of the congregants came up to me crying about how beautiful it was. So that is not an everyday occurrence. I hope you find it almost as good as that congregant did. But it's certainly good. And if you want to listen to it again, I'll send you the link you can watch it anytime you want. It's really a magical piece. And now we're going to close off with Leon Hyman's Veshameru. This is a rehearsal recording that was made on my cell phone from the back of the synagogue. They didn't even know I was doing it. So I'm sure Leon would not appreciate me showing it to a big crowd like you guys here, but shh, okay, here we go. That is Leon Hyman's Veshameru. It grows on you. I've listened to it a couple times. I like it more and more every time I listen to it. I can also tell you that there is another recording that was done at the dinner. I forgot what year it was. There was a dinner that we held for the Chatanim when Arnie and Peter Neustatter were being honored, and Leon played that piece. It's an even better recording. I just have to get it in a position that I can share it with you, which is not right now. So if you liked it, write to me. Better yet, if you liked it, write to Leon. Let him know you liked his piece. That, everyone, is my spiel for this evening. If you want to sum it up, there are traditional modes for Veshameru as well as art pieces. I hope that you will come to synagogue, hear the choir on a Friday night. It's magical. I'll let you know if they're doing the regular one or one of the more unusual ones. If you ask me ahead of time, I'll let you know. Pretty much every week now it's going to be the regular one because the other ones require rehearsal time. But yeah, it's a nice piece. Come join us. And now I will ask everyone to unmute, or whoever wants to. I'm going to stop the recording.